Life, good morning. Good to have you with us. I'm Joe Fryer.
And I'm Savannah Sellers. We begin our show with the ongoing fallout from Sunday's drone attack that killed 3 U.S. soldiers in northeastern Jordan. The U.S. says it was carried out by an Iran-backed group in the region.
As he departed the White House yesterday, President Biden said he has decided on a response to the attack, but he did not elaborate on what that would be. NBC News senior White House reporter Peter Nicholas joins us now. Peter, I know we are getting some new information from U.S. officials about what that response could look like. What are we hearing?
Well, we're hearing that the response could take weeks and not days, that this is not going to be a one-off retaliatory strike. The president obviously doesn't want to telegraph what his moves are going to be, but NBC News has learned that it will probably include Iranian targets in several countries. There are some Republicans in Congress who would like to see the U.S. hit Iranian soil directly, but it's unlikely that Biden will do that. He doesn't want to escalate this. He doesn't want a wider war, as he said.
The militant group that claimed responsibility for Sunday's attack, they released a statement yesterday. It says they're suspending operations against U.S. forces. Walk us through this. Why is this? What's the reaction been from the U.S.? And then could there be any indication that this impacts the president's response?
The U.S. is not putting very much stock in this at all. The Pentagon spokesman has issued a statement basically saying actions speak louder than words. There's very little likelihood that this is going to deter the U.S. retaliatory strike. Biden is under a lot of pressure to respond to avenge these deaths of U.S. soldiers and to show that Iranian-backed militia groups cannot target American troops with impunity. So I don't think that this statement is going to have much impact on the U.S. retaliatory response.
Peter, we understand the president has spoken with the victims' families. What can you tell us about that and any plans to try and bring them home?
Yes, there'll be what's called a dignified transfer that will take place on Friday. President Biden has spoken to the families and essentially asked if they would want him there to be present. And sometimes these are very fraught moments. The families are understandably distraught, and families have signaled that they do want President Biden to attend. I mean, he's someone who has suffered grievous loss in his own right. I mean, he lost a son, Bo, who served in Iraq. He lost his wife and daughter in the early 1970s in a car crash. And this business of consoling families who are grieving is something that he excels at and is important to him. So he will be there.
All right. Peter Nicholas, thank you so much. Appreciate your reporting this morning.
Well, sources tell NBC News that Hamas is reviewing a U.S.-backed proposal to release the remaining hostages being held in Gaza, along with a 60-day ceasefire. The deal follows a series of high-level talks in Paris between officials from Israel, the U.S., and Qatar. It is the first time negotiations have seemingly resumed since late November. NBC News foreign correspondent Matt Bradley has the details.
So that deal to try to free those more than 100 hostages, including 6 Americans still being held on the Gaza Strip, is coming along, but slowly. We just heard yesterday that White House National Security Advisor met with some of the families of some of those American hostages. He updated them on the negotiations and tried to reassure them of the administration's commitment to freeing them. But this has been a really thorny issue here, so thorny that the U.S. dispatched the head of the CIA, Bill Burns, to Paris over the weekend to try to hash out a deal, not with Hamas necessarily, but with other parties. He met, and this is just rehashing, he met with his counterparts from Israel and Egypt and with the Prime Minister of Qatar. They came up with a proposal that is now in Hamas's hands, and it would basically say 2 months, some reporting has said 6 weeks, of a pause in the fighting in exchange for an exchange of prisoners, Palestinian prisoners, 3 of them for each Israeli or American held in the Gaza Strip. Now, that is still controversial, and not just on the Hamas side. Hamas has asked that they will only release all of those prisoners if Israel agrees to a full and final ceasefire, something that Israel has so far rejected. But even here in Israel, there's some opposition to freeing those hostages too cheaply. And that's the word we're kind of hearing bandied about by some right-wing ministers and politicians who say they don't want to see Palestinian prisoners, some of whom have been implicated in very serious terrorism charges, others less serious charges, hitting the streets once again in exchange for not enough. And that's why this has become so controversial, even as we're seeing families of the hostages protesting in Jerusalem and here in Tel Aviv, often in front of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's home. The pressure on him is substantial. But now we're hearing that Hamas has been invited to Cairo. Now, Israeli reporting says that Hamas delegation is arriving in Cairo today. NBC News has not confirmed that. But this could mean that this deal could be moving slowly forward, and we might have more news next week.
All right, Matt Bradley, thank you so much.
Early this morning, House Republicans on the Homeland Security Committee voted along party lines to advance 2 articles of impeachment against Homeland Security Secretary Alejandro Mayorkas.
The committee met all day yesterday to debate the merits of impeaching Mayorkas, accusing him and the Biden administration of disregarding federal laws on immigration. Mayorkas, however, has called the accusations against him baseless. A vote by the full House of Representatives is now expected as early as next week.
This comes as a bipartisan group of lawmakers continues working toward a deal on border security. Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer says progress is being made.
All through the weekend, negotiators continued their work on the National Security Supplemental. We are approaching the finish line, but the work is not done. For the first time in over a decade, we have a golden opportunity to make meaningful, lasting changes to the southern border. The best chance we will likely have in a good while.
For the latest on the border, we're joined by NBC News correspondent David Noriega in Eagle Pass, Texas, and NBC News congressional correspondent Julie Sirkin. David, let's begin with you. Eagle Pass has been one of the flashpoints along the border. What's the latest you're hearing, and what are some of the main concerns that people might have there?
Hey guys, good morning. Yeah, so in terms of migrant crossings here in Eagle Pass, things have actually quieted down quite a bit, especially compared to where they were last month. Last month you had, just the border is right behind me, I don't know if you can see it in the dark, but you had tens of thousands of people crossing the border at this point over the course of December. That number has dropped precipitously, probably mostly due to seasonal fluctuations in migration patterns that you see pretty much every year. Nevertheless, you can still feel the political tensions quite strongly here. Just down the way is the park that Texas authorities took over to prevent Border Patrol access to the river and to prevent migrants from turning themselves over to Border Patrol to seek asylum. You also have a lot of people who are anticipating the arrival of a convoy of Trump supporters, self-described patriots, who are meant to arrive here later this week. It's unclear how much size that convoy is actually gathering or how much of an event it's actually going to be. But we've already spoken to and seen several people trickling in some cases from many hours away, different parts of Texas, in anticipation of that convoy. I've also spoken to some community members, just regular residents here of Eagle Pass, who sort of feel like they're stuck in the middle of this political battle between Texas Republicans and the Biden administration, some of whom are upset that they no longer have access to their beloved park, have also felt overwhelmed by the arrival of large numbers of migrants, and generally just wish that someone would do something to take care of this issue. Back to you guys.
Julie, let's bring you in here, talk about what we've seen on the Hill. So Mayorkas could potentially be the first cabinet secretary to be impeached in 150 years. What are some of the key takeaways from yesterday's hearing?
Yeah, guys, this was an all-day hearing, all-night hearing. They didn't vote until well into the night, but they did end up approving 2 articles of impeachment. The Homeland Security Chairman, Mark Green, the committee in the House, he actually said that Mayorkas does deserve to be impeached based on these 2 articles, willfully ignoring the will of the law, willfully ignoring and not enforcing the law that Congress has passed, and also breaching public trust. Democrats tried to stall this as much as they could. They kept pointing to the fact that, look, we do have a bipartisan border solution emerging. Let's focus on that instead of going down this political process, as they called it. Take a listen to some of the exchanges between Mark Green, the chairman, and the ranking member, Benny Thompson, on the panel.
We have not approached this day or this process lightly. Secretary Mayorkas' actions have forced our hand. We cannot allow this border crisis to continue. We cannot allow a cabinet secretary with no regard for the separation of powers or the rule of law to remain in office.
In a process akin to throwing spaghetti at the wall and seeing what sticks, Republicans have cooked up vague, unprecedented grounds to impeach Secretary Mayorkas.
Now, nonetheless, all the back and forth didn't stop the committee from approving this on a party line vote. Just in the last minute, we got a statement from the Speaker of the House, Mike Johnson. I want to read you just a little part of it. He commended the passage of these impeachment articles in the House committee, the Homeland Security Committee. He said this was an exhaustive investigation. He called this a solemn step they didn't want to take, but they had to take, according to Johnson. Again, that vote on the full House floor could happen as early as next week, though it has not yet been nailed down.
So, Julie, that's the House. Meanwhile, in the Senate, you have these efforts to try and reach a deal to secure the border. What's the latest on that? And what's the reaction to President Biden's assertion that he does want the authority to shut down the border?
Exactly, guys. This is going to be released as part of the full supplemental security package. Remember what this is all about. The border issue needs to be fixed, according to Republicans who said this months ago, in order to unlock foreign aid to Ukraine, to Israel, to Taiwan, all these key issues that the Biden administration wants to get settled soon. Now, Schumer, the majority leader of Democrats in the Senate, has said that they're not there yet. They're still putting the finishing touches on it. But what we've been able to see in our reporting that's part of this proposal is it is very conservative. It will will mandate an authority for the administration to shut down the border once they see migrant crossings reach a daily average over 7 days of 5,000 or exceeding 8,500 in one day. This is really significant. It'll be interesting to see how Republicans respond to it once that text is released. I'm told the goal is potentially tomorrow. Maybe it'll slide into Friday. Certainly, they still have some finishing touches to put on it. Take a listen to what Schumer had to say on the floor.
It's entirely unsurprising and truly disappointing at the same time that many on the hard right, including Donald Trump, are now trying to thwart this bipartisan effort for the sake of electoral politics. But here in the Senate, both sides have an obligation to tune the partisan noise out and to continue working. Bipartisanship is the only way that action on the border is going to happen.
So listen, Johnson has not said flat out that he will not put this on the floor, but certainly all eyes are on the Senate. If they can manage to really get this done, to get this out and get this on the floor and then pass it with enough Republicans and Democrats supporting it, it will certainly put a lot of pressure on Johnson, even though he is being pressured by the former president and some of those hard right members.
David, I want to know if you could tell us more about this ongoing divide between the White House and then Texas Governor Greg Abbott over the handling of migrants at the southern border. What are you hearing on the ground, and where do things stand now?
Yeah, Savannah, so for a couple of years now, Governor Abbott has been carrying out what he calls Operation Lone Star. That includes a number of different sort of actions here on the border, everything from putting razor wire along the banks of the Rio Grande here to new fencing to most recently taking over Shelby Park, which was one of the main crossing points that migrants were using to get on Texas ground. This has led to a pretty substantial conflict between the government of Texas and the federal government. The way that this plays out on the ground is a little bit more complicated between rank and file Border Patrol officers and Texas National Guard and Texas state troopers. They actually tend to often work together on these things. So the divide is more on the national level between Biden and Abbott and the federal government and the state government than it is between the agents of these actual agencies. And, you know, just being here on the ground, I've been asking myself the question, this is a pretty good test case for, do these policies on the ground, do these measures really work when all is said and done, right? Texas says that these are deterrent measures. They're intended to dissuade migrants from trying to make the crossing into the U.S. When you talk to people who've been, for example, representing criminal defense attorneys who've been representing the migrants who Texas arrests as part of Operation Lone Star, they say that those migrants wind up back in immigration custody anyway after they've gone through Texas state criminal procedures and are often once again released into the country to await their asylum cases, which is what would normally have happened anyway. The numbers have also still been going up. Last month we saw record numbers here in Texas. So a lot of people, especially here in the community, see these Operation Lone Star measures as largely political rather than substantive border management issues. Obviously, the state of Texas would disagree with that assessment. That's a big part of the debate that's going on the ground right now. Back to you.
David and Julie with the latest on what's happening at the border. Thank you both.
Well, the Justice Department is investigating Missouri Congresswoman Cori Bush for her campaign spending on security services. According to the St. Louis Post-Dispatch, Bush's use of funds first came into question last February after she married her security guard, who then remained on her campaign payroll while providing security for the Congresswoman. The Justice Department subpoenaed the office of the House Sergeant at Arms for documents related to the matter. Bush denies any wrongdoing, and she says she is fully cooperating in the investigation. Well, the West Coast is getting slammed with heavy rain, winds, and snow. For more on this wet, wintry mix, let's get a check on your forecast.
Yeah, meteorologist Angie Lastman joins us with that. Angie, good morning.
Good morning, guys. We've got another storm system that's working in and bringing ample amounts of rain. We've got some snow on the table and some strong winds, and this is going to be impacting folks across the West over the next couple of days. Here's the deal right now. We're starting off quite soggy. We're going to continue to see this kind of scenario lasting for the next couple of days, and we've got plenty of alerts up already. We've got more than 20 million people under flood alerts, mostly across portions of California, including Southern California and stretching into San Francisco and points north of that. We've got wind alerts for 25 million people, and we've got winter alerts in effect as well for some of those mountain ranges. Let's start with how this plays out over the next couple of days. We've got this Pacific storm system, Pineapple Express, bringing us plenty of moisture, beelining from Hawaii basically all the way into the California coast. And this means that there's going to be an enhanced risk for some flooding over the next couple of days, specifically San Fran up into portions of Oregon. That's where we're going to see the best chance of some of the heaviest of the rain. But that doesn't mean we're not going to get a good soaking rain and the potential for flooding for points south of that. We'll see this system work inland, but the rain doesn't stop. We're still going to see some snow and some rain here as we get into the day tomorrow. And then the Rockies and parts of the desert Southwest will start to see some rain and snow spread into those regions. That happens by the time the end of the work week rolls around. Meanwhile, as we get through those next couple of days, some really good substantial rain. We could see isolated amounts 6 to 10 inches at the King Range, coastal areas, all on the table for seeing some of those higher amounts. And when we're talking about snow, we could see up to 4 feet in some spots across those mountain ranges. So we've got places like Mammoth, we've got Sequoia National Park seeing some of those higher amounts. So, of course, across the Sierra Range, we're going to be watching that. Meanwhile, right now, because we've had such a kind of warm El Nino situation with the storms, that means we've had more rain than snow in this region, so we really could use some snow across this area. Northern Sierra coming in only at 60% of snowpack for the average of what they usually see, even less than that as you go farther south into Central Sierra and even farther south into Southern Sierra, 35% for the snowpack. So really could use some of those couple of inches in up to feet in those regions. The winds are going to be another problem for folks across this area. 40, 50 mile per hour wind gusts are possible. Crescent City coming in at 55 mile per hour winds potentially here as we get into the evening hours tonight. So a heads up for folks there. The travel will be difficult. Not only will we have the rain, but we'll also have some snow across that part of the country, guys. But the mountain snow will continue into Friday and into the weekend. And we've got another storm system on deck by the time the weekend ends for them.
All right. Sounds good. Thanks, Angie. Appreciate
Thank you.
it. Legendary Broadway performer Chita Rivera has passed away at the age of 91. Rivera was best known for her roles in West Side Story, Chicago, and Kiss of the Spider Woman. This morning, NBC News correspondent Rahima Ellis reflects on her trailblazing life and legacy.
And that's good. Isn't it great? Isn't it great?
Chita Rivera was always more than great.
I'm so lucky.
And to see her dance, it's clear. Her success was way more than luck. Born in Washington, D.C. in 1933 with the full name
Dolores Conchita Figueroa de Rivera, Montestuco Florentina Canimacro de Fluente.
As a child, she took ballet and by 16 won a scholarship to the American School of Ballet in New York to dance with the famed George Balanchine.
Once a dancer, always a dancer.
Actually, she was a triple threat, dancing, acting, and singing her way into the very history of the American musical. From the classic West Side Story, originating the role of Anita, navigating racial prejudices in the 1960s.
It wasn't just a show. You know, it was information about what's happening.
To the all-American Bye Bye Birdie, to a seedier America in Chicago.
And all that jazz.
Nominated numerous times for a Tony and winning twice for The Rink.
Thank you for this. What a wonderful honor.
And The Kiss of the Spider Woman, which marked a triumphant return to the stage after a devastating car crash that required 16 pins to fix a broken leg. But she never stopped dancing, working on Broadway well into her 80s. Her life measured in accomplishments. The first Hispanic woman to receive the Kennedy Center Award, a Tony Lifetime Achievement Award, a Presidential Medal of Freedom.
Like her unforgettable Anita, Chita Rivera has shown that life can indeed be bright in America.
And a successful one-woman show.
It's what I love, love, love to do.
And Chita Rivera lived it to the fullest.
Miss Rivera, you're on.
Good.
Rahima Ellis, NBC News.
She was so good.
What a life, too, at 91. What a great look back.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.